073. Peter's calling from Oxford. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. What do you make of this, Peter?
Well, I mean, I'm speaking from the perspective of a GP. I was senior partner for many years in my practice in Oxford, and I'm now part-time working as a locum in many, many practices. I've had a huge perspective on what it's like working in practice. I think that GPs have been grossly maligned. And I'm in the usual position that I can speak out quite frankly, because many of my colleagues, well, certainly colleagues who are employed in the health service, are feeling intimidated, really, about speaking the truth about how difficult it is and how badly managed the health service is. I know certainly there has been a degree of browbeating of colleagues, I suppose more in hospital than in general practice, but nonetheless there's been a serious atmosphere of having to be stum about this. So I think what I want to say is, first of all, Louise Irving is entirely right, and so are you in pointing out to the serious decline in GP numbers. Politicians point out that there are more bodies on the ground, but of course that doesn't reflect the actual workforce, because more people are working part-time, and many people have been forced to work part-time because of the stress of the job. There are significantly fewer full-time equivalents on the ground, and of course the demands are greater. Even without COVID, the demands were getting greater. We had huge problems recruiting when I was a partner. You were very lucky to get suitable applicants at all for the jobs, and I know that's got much worse since then. And I'm being inundated with offers of work because I'm seeing many unfilled shifts for some of the work I do, because quite simply there aren't enough people to fill those. And I think when patients complain about not being able to see a GP, they really fail to acknowledge that reality. And they say, my GP would rather talk to me on the phone than see me face-to-face. Well, it's not true. But GPs actually were pressed into a different mode of working in the early stages of the pandemic by Matt Hancock. And rightly so, because even now, COVID is still a real thing. The numbers are high. Filling doctors' waiting rooms with sick people is a very effective way of transmitting viruses. And so GPs are having to work in a different fashion, and will have to do so for quite a lot longer in order to protect their patients. A lot of the consulting I do would be by telephone or video. And for many things that works very well. I wouldn't dismiss it. The important thing is to give the patient what is right for them and to use your time effectively so that you can see more patients and treat them effectively. So I think it would have been much maligned. When Sajid Javid came into office, one of the first things he did was to expect GPs to move back to face-to-face consulting, even at a time when COVID was prevalent. And GPs were saying, well, we're not ready to open our doors to face-to-face consulting on that scale because we don't know what's going to happen next. And of course, they were quite right, because then within a month we had Omicron. And, again, politicians have gone a bit quiet about this because they're beginning to recognise that face-to-face consulting isn't always the answer. So, they've learned that. But then in December, GPs were taken for granted once again by being asked to lead on the booster program without any consultation, whatever. And that was at the expense of a lot of the other services they provide. So when patients feel they can't see their GP, well, because GPs have been given more to do with no more resources. In that sense, Louise is quite right. And the final thing I was going to say was that all of this relates, the serious shortage of doctors has been fed by the loss of freedom of movement. A lot of the GPs I know are European nationals who've been working in the NHS and made their home here, but have been made unwelcome. And they're being asked now to apply for settled status, and they're being kept on in sufferance. Nobody wants to do that. And that's been seriously damaging for the health service as a whole. Absolutely catastrophic.
And would you say that's a direct consequence of Brexit, Peter?
I would say in the case of, when you look at the numbers, 10% of GPs are EU nationals, or were before Brexit. About half of those have left. So do the sums. It's a very significant contributor to the workforce shortage. And until people wake up, politicians wake up to the reality that freedom of movement is something upon which the economy and the health service of this country have been highly reliant, I think things aren't going to get any better. It's something that really needs to be looked at very seriously.
All right, Peter, thank you for that. That's Peter in Oxford. Let's go to Hannah, who's calling from Manchester. Hannah, what do you make of this?
Yeah,